Filming in front of the other shelf today. The mysterious other shelf that we're always pointing to off on the side of our videos. I spoil you guys. Hi everyone, welcome to Game On Board Game, a channel where we talk about board games and do fun games and challenges based on our love for them. I'm Ethan, and today, there's no Ashley. Ashley's actually out of town for a few days, so I figured while we're in Ethan's house, I'd cook up something a little different and special for you guys. Now, if there's one hobby or interest of mine that supersedes even board games, it would be music. I love music. I used to be in a few bands growing up. I can play a couple instruments poorly. Love going to concerts. I have a pretty good sized CD collection. Yes, CDs. If you think that's lame or weird or whatever, come at me in the comments. I would love to talk to you about why CDs are still great. And honestly, when Ashley does have to go away like this and I end up having the house to myself for a few days, something I love doing is just blasting some tunes on my stereo at a volume that I would not normally be able to get away with. So what I cooked up for this week's video is I'm going to take 5 of my favorite board games and try to pair them up with what I think are complementary musical albums. So keyword there being albums. That's the primary way that I like to engage with music. I love just putting a CD on and letting it play like front to back, getting that whole experience, going on that journey. But I know that's not for everyone, so once I finish kind of talking about the overall vibe of each album, I'll also give you guys one highlight track that you can go to check out as just sort of a quicker example of like what the music's all about, and maybe that like pairs particularly well with the board game. Now that being said, these are not going to be perfect pairings. This is really just an excuse for me to talk about music a little bit. So they might not make sense to you as much as they do to me. I'm really just going off of like feel, kind of like what I think about, what I feel when I'm listening to the music. If what you're looking for is a way to kind of spice up your game night with like a soundtrack that really sets the mood, this might not be what you're looking for. That's not exactly what we're talking about here tonight. Like for example, I love Arkham Horror. I know that there are people out there who have made playlists of sort of like spooky horror ambient soundscape tracks that are perfect for like setting the mood for that sort of a game. Or if you're playing like an IP based game, you're playing like a Lord of the Rings game and you want to like throw the Lord of the Rings soundtrack on, or a dinosaur game, you're going to do Jurassic Park, something like that, right? That really like makes perfect sense. Not really what we're talking about here today. In other words, I'm not going to be pulling out Star Wars Rebellion and telling you to put on John Williams. Okay, so if we're all on the same page here, let's get into it. The first game I have to talk about with you guys is Viticulture. Classic worker placement game that's still one of our favorites. I really admire its simplicity and straightforwardness, that all you're doing is like putting out workers onto the board, but it's able to give you sort of a mix of crunchy strategy with a strong theme that really comes through as well. Because in this game you are working a vineyard, trying to make wine, and all the steps that you're going through with that really make sense. If it's not a game that you've played before though, I feel like you can probably get a pretty good idea of the vibe just from this cover here. The game takes place in Tuscany. It's very pastoral. It feels like kind of a throwback to an earlier, simpler time, maybe like early 1900s or something like that. Very European, very calm, tranquil, and it really just kind of like transports you to a different world when you're playing it. If you haven't played this before, check it out. Or if it's been a little while, try and get it to the table again. Now the album I have to pair with Viticulture is called Gulag Orchestra by the band Beirut. Beirut is, I guess you'd call them like an indie folk band, but they have a very strong influence from traditional Balkan music. So what you're going to hear on this album is a lot of horns, a lot of unique instruments like accordion and ukulele, some foreign language singing, but plenty of English as well. And it has that same ability to just kind of like transport you overseas, make you feel like you're walking around this like ancient, beautiful architecture, or in a tranquil pastoral vineyard, something like that. No other music I've heard, at least that could still be considered sort of like traditional pop music, really is able to capture that same vibe. Now this is not my favorite Beirut album. It's their first one, and therefore it's like the truest to that sort of authentic European Balkan sound. As they go on, they tend to get a little more poppy, and I think they hit a sweet spot on their like second or third album or so, and after that just get like too much sellout. But this one is still great, so definitely check it out. The highlight track I have for you for this is going to be Postcards from Italy. That's probably the most accessible sort of entry point for this album, and it's still a great track. Plus, Postcards from Italy, Tuscany, how you going to beat that? Okay, our next game is Dead of Winter. So this is a cooperative crisis management game set in a world of sort of a zombie apocalypse. Think Walking Dead vibes. I haven't actually seen that show. Ashley really loves it, says this board game pretty much nails it. In Dead of Winter, you're playing as this cast of characters that have built up this colony where they're just trying to survive as long as possible through a zombie apocalypse. Sometimes you gotta go out from the colony though to gather resources or achieve different missions and quests. This has really a tight, tense gameplay, also strong thematics that come through though. The Crossroads deck where people can draw different cards that have story elements that trigger throughout the gameplay is really, really cool. This is a game we've loved for a long time and it still holds up. Now to pair with Dead of Winter, we've got the album Blackwater Park by Opeth. Opeth is a death metal band, maybe like black metal. Honestly, I'm not diehard enough to know that. Metalheads, please in the comments tell me how wrong I am. But I think of this as sort of like thinking man's metal. You know, it's not just balls to the wall thrash, it's not mindless brocore. In between the sort of really heavy, distorted, growly sections, there are softer passages with clean guitar, clean vocals, introspective lyrics, and it's able to create a nice contrast between the two. The reason I think that this fits really well with Dead of Winter is because those softer moments remind me of sort of the calm before the storm. You know, in a zombie apocalypse, it's not always crazy running for your life, attacking, blood, all of that kind of stuff. Sometimes, you do get to just exist for a while. You settle down in the bunker. You have these sort of quiet, contemplative moments where maybe you ponder your existence and wonder, why am I fighting through this hellscape? And this album really complements that. At the same time, though, like I said, calm before the storm. That peace and quiet isn't going to last forever. At some point, the zombies are going to break through the barriers, everything's going to go crazy, and it's going to get fucking metal. Another great thing about this is I really think it captures sort of the cold, dark, wintry vibes of Dead of Winter. Both lyrically and musically, it just fits that sort of a mood. And in fact, the highlight track that I have for you guys is actually going to be the opener, called The Leper Affinity, which has the opening line, "We enter winter once again." Really sets the stage for a night of fighting zombies. Okay, next up, we've got Spirit Island. This is a good one. I know a lot of people love this game. So again, we're looking at co-op here, but thematically, this flips a lot of sort of traditional Euro games on its head. A lot of the times you're used to playing as the colonizers, basically, right? In this case, you're playing as the natural spirits of this island trying to fend off the colonizers, actually. It's got really crunchy gameplay, really resistant to quarterbacking that some co-op games can suffer from, and so much variety and variability with all the different spirits and adversaries and scenarios and aspects and just endless customization options. To go with Spirit Island, I've got The Inner Mounting Flame by Mahavishnu Orchestra. This is a jazz fusion group from the 70s, so these are all instrumentals with amazing solos, progressive arrangements, but somehow it's just really able to capture a spiritual feel. Listening to the guitar work on this album feels like you're invoking some sort of ancient tribal ritual. I don't know how to explain it better than that. I don't think I'm just imagining that either, it's clearly a theme they were going for. Listen to the name of some of these tracks. Meeting of the Spirits, number 1 right off the bat. A Lotus on Irish Streams. Vital Transformation, The Dance of the Maya, Awakening. If those don't make you want to summon the forces of the earth and the elements to drive off the invaders, you need to put this album on and it will make you want to do that. My highlight track for this is going to be Dawn. That one's not as blisteringly crazy as some of the tracks, but it's very well composed and really kind of draws you in as it develops. Give it a listen. Now, moving on to Obsession. This is another basically worker placement game, but that's going to be taking place on cards that you're playing out from this hand that you're building up, or tiles from this tableau that you're building, for kind of a pretty unique twist on that mechanism. Thematically, I'm not sure how to describe it. Most people could just call it this is Pride and Prejudice in a board game. And you can even see the tagline here, Pride, Intrigue, and Prejudice in Victorian England. You're managing your estate and your servants as you put on events to try and attract high society types, and eventually hopefully marry off someone in your family to one of the creme de la creme Fairchilds. To pair with Obsession, we've got a twofer. We've got Rufus Wainwright's Want 1 and Want 2. So this is not a true double album, but they are sort of sister albums that were conceived and recorded at the same time period and released in pretty close succession to each other. Rufus Wainwright is a singer-songwriter that brings a lot of sort of theater and musical influence into his music, especially on these two albums. There's a lot of very ornate arrangements, a lot of sort of like heightened drama like you'd see on the stage, and a general sort of like frou-frou-ness that I feel like fits the Victorian England vibe pretty well. Now if you look at these album covers, you're gonna see a bit of a like more medieval type of setting. We sort of like have a knight and maybe a princess or something like that. So the time period is a little bit off, but we'll use our imagination. Stylistically, I actually feel like there's not a huge sort of difference there, because the type of like honor and integrity that you would expect from a Knight of the Round Table is very similar to that sort of keep your chin up and act very like prim and proper of Victorian England, you know what I mean? My highlight track is called Little Sister, and it's one that really leans fully into the classical aesthetic. It really sounds like something you could imagine being played probably by real musicians back in the day, but, in the parlor at one of these obsession parties. And last up, we have Lost Ruins of Arnak. This is a game that combines worker placement with deck building as you sort of explore a jungle and come across different dangers and find unique relics and artifacts. The expedition team here is clearly getting in over their heads, and there's a real element of having to work with the realities of nature and kind of roll with the punches and take whatever it might throw at you in order to get by and get through. And I think that sort of idea fits very well with The Trial of Van Occupanther by Midlake. Now, to talk about this album, I'm actually going to talk about another band, Fleet Foxes, if any of you know them. I'm a pretty big fan, but my friend and I have this kind of running joke that we like to talk about with Fleet Foxes, because there's this famous review of their first album where it was described as fucking canoeing music. And if you've ever listened to Fleet Foxes, that probably makes a lot of sense to you. Anyway, I like to take that joke and apply it to this album, which I think would be described more as fucking frontiering music. This really feels like late 1800s, westward expansion, living off the land. Different setting than Arnak, not a jungle, more of like the Great Plains, but that same sense of like just kind of taking it day by day and having to work with what resources you can come across. Trying to build shelter out of branches and stones and hope that like fair weather blesses you, hoping you won't run into like bandits or any dangers on the road, which brings me to my highlight track, number 2, Bandits. That one really talks about all the stuff that I'm bringing up here. This one I get is like maybe a little bit of a reach, but it makes sense to me, and either way, it's a great album that's worth giving a listen to. Alright, well that wraps it up. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Honestly, hope maybe it introduced you to some new music that you might want to check out and explore. If you got a kick out of these pairings, let me know. I could try to come up with 5 more games and 5 more albums some point down the road. Or if you just want to chat music in general, hit me up in the comments. Like I said, I love music. Let me know what you're into. I would love to talk about it. Alright, thanks for watching. Thanks for dealing with me. Don't worry, Ashley will be back next week. She's got a pretty special video planned for you guys as well that's very up her alley. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe, join our community of fellow board gamers, check out some of these albums, and game on.